And this is something that, yeah, is interesting because, of course, there is what's at the edge that we can already see. And then there's always what are the curious things that will still pop. And it's very hard to know what is going to be in the field. If we asked in maybe 2020 how AI would have affected coaching in the next 5 years, I would only have believed Rickus in this room when he told me how things are going to be. So, the world of our profession changes quickly, and it's interesting to just see where things are at. But I don't have a crystal ball. This is my best guess. And I'd love to invite our conversation from here. So my first question is just for a couple of people. You can use the chat, but I'd love to hear a couple of voices as well around this question. What excites you about coaching, and maybe even if you want to go a little bit more broadly, leadership development in 2026? And what makes you anxious or scares you? So what's the edge of excitement and what's the edge of anxiety if you look ahead at what you think is going to happen in coaching in 2026? And I'd invite a couple of people to just unmute and pop into the room with your thoughts and use the chat for that too. So raise your hand if you want to speak, and then we'll invite you in, and then we'll go deeper from there. Yeah. What excites you? What makes you anxious about coaching in 2026? So there's some thoughts here about collaborations and collective competencies in teams and organization, building care infrastructures. Thank you, Ella. That's really interesting. Anyone that would like to venture some thoughts with voice?
Hi, I am Joanne Haynes from Trinidad and Tobago.
Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you. I was introduced to the Enneagram very recently through Pat, and she did mine with me. But prior to doing that, for quite a few years, I have been kind of toying in the back of my mind with the idea of learning to be a life coach. I don't know anything about it in terms of, I haven't done any training in it or anything like that. But as a writer, I find that my intuition is pretty high, and I tend to have a very people-oriented focus, creative and people-oriented. So one of the things that really excites me about this time that we live in is the extent to which there is so much help and so much interest and so much information in people coming back to oneself. And so many different ways, and whether it's Buddhism, whether it's something like Enneagram, whether it's whatever, but there is a plethora of information and easy access to people finding the ways and means back to themselves. And I really celebrate that, because I think that it's so easy to get caught up and lost in the world. We all do it, myself, everybody, and sometimes you're not aware that you're kind of out of sync. So these are things that excite me. What bothers me about this time we live in is that despite all this information and access, I think that people are more disconnected and lonely than we've ever been. And things like memes pass for conversation, and a quick text passes for friendship. And I think that it's a scary time, because this isolation in tandem with the access to 24-hour news can raise our levels of depression and anxiety very much in this world. So that's my 2 bits. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And such a truth spoken, that a meme or a thumbs up or a little heart emoji passes for conversation and intimacy, and the impact that has on the collective human psyche and our loneliness, that truly resonates. So thank you. Thank you, Joanne. Yeah. Anyone else? Let's just hear from one more voice. Anything about our coaching field that excites, scares, intimidates, as you look ahead to 2026? Okay, then we're going to jump in with my thoughts. Julia has some interesting thoughts in the chat as well, but let's jump into some of my thinking as well. Um, and just keep the conversation going in the chat. So let's start with the size of our industry today. So the ICF's 2025 report said that there's roughly 123,000 coaches in the world today, which is about a 15% growth in the number of coaches that are offering all kinds of services since 2023. It's quite a big growth. They estimate that the direct coaching industry income was about 5.34 billion USD in 2025. And that when you ask coaches what kind of coaching you do, the dominant kind of coaching that comes up is leadership or executive coaching. So that's kind of some formal reporting, as the ICF has that in their current report. And if we jump in deeper, we've spoken about that. A question I'd like you to put a pin in right now is if you had to put yourself on a continuum from one side where we believe that things will only get worse, kind of an apocalypse now, an apocalypse soon perspective, to things will only get better on the other side of the continuum. What are your thoughts about where the world is going as you see it now in January 2026? Just note that for yourself somewhere. It's going to be relevant later in our conversation. And then the second question is, how much agency to change things do you feel you have right now? So a lot of agency. Wow, I can change anything that I choose to change in this world, or almost no agency. I am at the mercy of this world. So think about where you are on the continuum of things will get better, worse, and how much agency you have. Write that down for yourself, and we'll come back to that as a theme for our conversation today. So when we talk about coaching trends, I think it's very important to not just look at coaching trends from within the coaching industry itself. So asking coaches what coaches think coaching trends are is very different to looking at the future of work, or trends in business and leadership, or trends in human capital and technology and agile and the well-being and wellness industry. There's many different perspectives we can take on this. And I'm not only going to come at this from the perspective of what coaches say in coaching podcasts about where the world is going, because I think we can navel gaze a little bit at times inside that world. So let's start with workplace trends. So I read a number of articles. I've been listening to people, and here are a couple of things, maybe starting with the most obvious. So the first is that human tech partnerships are on the increase. So whether we're talking thinking partnerships in terms of LLMs, or more doing partnerships in terms of robotics, that's on the increase. And that has certain implications for management. And management responsibility is moving towards orchestrating the interface between tech and human, even more so than before. And it's not just something that the IT department are responsible for. It's like leaders, managers everywhere are starting to need to take responsibility for how we orchestrate that interface. Second thing, maybe just one of my good friends, Craig Gateman, recently wrote an article where he said it seems like that in part of the world, the word management has become a swear word. We can only talk about leadership. But when we talk about these kinds of things, human tech partnerships and the management of the interface, we are talking about a management responsibility. And it's not a leadership responsibility. There's some leadership things that we can bring in there. But as a management responsibility, there are huge liabilities that lie in that small interface. And we need to take that very seriously in the workplace. The second trend is that there's this trend towards both a flattening of organizational structures in some industries, but not all of them, But together with that, a complete increase in the spans of control that managers need to work with. So, a while ago, 10 years ago, we'd say, wow, manager, if you're managing more than 12 people, you need to recontract on your span of control. It is fairly common for a manager to have between 20, sometimes even 40 people in their direct reporting line, in their direct span of control. And we're working in industries, some of you may be representing organizations where that is the case. And just think about that in relation to typical coaching conversations around you should have one-on-ones regularly with your team. If you have 40 people that you're trying to have half an hour one-on-ones with every 2 weeks, that's half your week every 2 weeks done for. Just in one-on-one. So span of control increasing, and the term that's being used out there is mega managers. And we can't just go, human capital, please make that span smaller. It's not how the trend is going. Then, especially in 2025, this thing of not one but two CEOs leading an organization is becoming more and more popular. So organizations like Spotify, Netflix, Oracle, and there's a whole list of organizations that are doing it. So this brings also this partnership, this duo dynamic from the top of the organization throughout the system. And we'll see how that relates to some trends around coaching the relationship as well. Where before, I think that co-founder dynamic was found in some kind of industries in startups more. This co-founder trend or co-CEO trend is now also rising. And I think it is because of the sheer volume of things that CEOs need to deal with. Then we have some trends towards local, even in return to office. Some larger organizations are talking about return to offices. So creating hubs of offices for a large organizations. Instead of going, everyone needs to come to this city and come to this office, there are a lot more regionalization of offices. But even in terms of supply chains and value chains, there are some trends towards local and being more aware of how certain technologies or inputs travel across space. And I think the volatility of the world is in part of this local trend, together with, of course, the impact of when everyone went and worked from everywhere during COVID, and now people needing to figure out how to manage return to work. In training and education, micro certifications are a big deal. Large one-shop programs, even like MBAs, are slightly less out of favor, and maybe there's a lag in formal education. But this large one thing that you do versus micro certifications that you can do in an hour or in 2 hours in the workplace, or very compact, that's becoming quite big in skills development. And skills development is very high up on the list because a lot of organizations know we no longer have the skills we need for the future. Some customers and some governments are starting to hold AI accountable. And this trend is just going to increase. So some of the implications of certain of the EU acts around use of AI have already come into play. Some of them are coming into play in August. Customers are starting to sue different tech companies for the kind of consequences of advice given. So there's more accountability coming into this, and what this means is when you work with tech, you need to start interrogating the ethics and the transparency of the tech that you use a lot more, because there is more accountability coming your way. Rise in blue-collar job demands, and even for a lot of young people, like somehow this idea of a white-collar job future is becoming less and less of a viable idea, even in young people's minds. I have a 19-year-old who's deep in that conversation with the world. Outcomes and return on investment is central to a whole lot of things, whether the coaching contracts will be renewed, whether we're doing more leadership development work, what gets funded in terms of further tech development, who we contract with, who we don't contract with. Can you show us outcomes? Can you show us that this investment is worthwhile? So the kind of golden era where in AI, people were just funding the ideas, not so much worrying about outcomes and ROI, that's gone. But the same thing is happening in the coaching world. And implementation commitments. Are we sticking, you said this, you do this, are you doing this? That is becoming more and more important. There's a lot more around loneliness. Joanne already put that in the space. Burnout, overwhelm, so negative mental health issues at all levels of the organization and beyond the organizations we work in as well. It's a very overwhelming world. And yes, then there's volatility all around us. I'm sure I'm not the only one who sometimes wakes up and thinks, what surprise package will I get when I open my favorite news network today? But there's, opportunities in some of the volatility. There's also some destruction of value that's happening in this volatility, and a lot of caution that can be seen out there. So these are some of the future of work and where workplace trends are going. And I want you to already start thinking, well, what does this mean for how I coach, the kinds of themes that I bring in? But I will tie this together to some of the impacts in coaching itself. Now, I also did some work with ChatGPT around ChatGPT's version of what key trends in coaching are. And 5 trends that came up here is human plus AI coaching, so kind of a blended model. We can't just have humans coaching humans all the time. It's less of that. Systemic team coaching, so beyond the one-on-one into coaching the relationship. We'll talk more about that too. Impact measurement for coaching, ROI, supervision, ethics and quality standards, and the importance of certification. That's big as well. But and then leadership capacity for turbulence, resilience, judgment, systems thinking. Now, if we look at how this works in that inner radial, we've got number 3 and 5, impact measurement and leadership capacity. And now it is again. So what I was trying to say was that we are already in mainstream of needing to measure, because companies are not just going to pay for coaching. And we are already in the mainstream of leaders knowing that they need to be ready for agile, complex, VUCA, BANI, all kinds of environments, right? That's mainstream already. Number 2, systemic team coaching is busy scaling. It's not just Peter Hawkins graduates and Oris graduates that are doing systems coaching. And in fact, coaching the relationship is one of the key themes that we need to be working with the atomic individual. That is just one individual at a time, has its benefits. But if we want to really work on transformation and change, working in the relational space is a big scaling trend. And then human AI coaching, the blended model, is a big thing as well. And we'll talk about how that positions the bigger enterprise coaching platforms like BetterUp and Ezra different to the individual coach operating on their own in this human AI coaching blend. And then supervision and the importance of supervision. We have some supervisors here in this room. It's becoming more and more important. Professional standards are becoming more important. And I think the professionalization of coaching is important. And as more people work through some of these enterprise digital coaching platforms that have certain entry-level requirements, certification is also becoming more and more more important. So here are some of our big predictions for 2026 from Aephoria side. The first thing is that coaching the relationship, which is not just team coaching, but pairs work. So working with different duos like colleagues at work, with couples, and if I'm more in the intimate space, without it becoming couples therapy or therapy for 2 people at work. But this pairs work, duo work is really going to become more important together with knowing how to do systemic and team coaching. And this is the place where more and more over the last couple of years, the world of organization development and the world of coaching are coming together. Because people in OD have been doing systemic team coaching work, but maybe not calling it team coaching, but team development work for decades. And coaches that have only been trained in individual methodologies are suddenly coming into contact with these systemic models that from an OD space we've been working with for decades. So coaching the relationship is a big trend in coaching. The second is thinking about not just agency or the expression of my power in a system, and not just talking about my maturity or wisdom or my level of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, but bringing these together into what Peter Limberger is calling wise agency. And thinking more and more about maturity not as a stage, but as a capacity, as a capability that enables us to work with the givens of our life in a different way. And bringing these two axes of how we work with our own personal expression of power into the system, into the collective, and our capacity for wisdom give us an interesting view that we'll explore a bit more. Human plus tech in the coaching workflow, I'm not going to say more about that, but to say that it's not just AI coaches, but all other kinds of technologies like nudge technologies to help with changing habits. Those kinds of things are becoming a lot more important, especially given that we have to measure return on investment and prove that certain outcomes are being received. And then nervous system regulation. I think this idea of like when I'm working with people that are super dysregulated because I'm overwhelmed, I'm burnt out, I'm sad, I'm lonely, I'm not in enough regulation to even be in the coaching space thinking about transforming the future or what I want to implement at work or what I want to shift or what I want to embed in my life. That regulation of the nervous system is incredibly important. And through that, there are all kinds of things that we understand this much, like dopamine, that as coaches, we need to understand much better. It's not just the pleasure center. It's a lot more complex in its interaction and its impact on ambition and motivation. But at the same time, there's a danger when we work too much in this like self-care space of retreating inwards and then almost just like looking at our own self-preservation and forgetting about the activism, the collective struggle that's out there. So how do we work with nervous system regulation and trauma awareness while still being willing to get into heat experiences? How do we take care of the self while also being willing to stand up for what needs to shift in community and what's not working? And that's an interesting kind of tension in our field that we need to look at. So some polarities we need to navigate in our coaching world: tech and efficiency and using these platforms versus depth and human presence. What does the AI do and coach? What do we do? What do we bring as humans? We need to show ROI. We need to show things are shifting. That's getting us into almost a performative contract in some coaching spaces versus our own maturation and our being and that aspect of the coaching relationship, which it's very useful to have ROI measures for those kinds of things. Regulated nervous systems versus systems change and being strategic and making things happen in the system, and not opting out of change because we want our inner worlds to be calm. Coaching the individual, coaching the system, coaching the relationship, and insight and reflection and integrating what we're experiencing in our life versus stepping into the new and making things happen and taking insight into action. Like this is one thing where I can chat to my wonderful chatbot and ChatGPT for ages and have 1,000 insights. And I may not put one single thing into practice. Um, and so how do we move from insight and reflection and get the right balance with experimentation and action? And of course, with any polarity, movement and flow between these is what keeps our practice alive. And then the third thing I want to pop in there with a not 2026 quote, an old quote from Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Everyone has three lives, a public life, a private life, and a secret life. I think a lot of the clients we work with, and for ourselves even, the distinction between our representational selves, so the part of us that we post on social media or that we put out there into the world, the persona that we have, which in many ways relates to the idealized self, but it's more than the idealized self. It's the represented self. And for me, that came to life when I'm looking at going to the beach here on our beautiful beaches in the summer and December we've had in the Southern Hemisphere, and noticing the difference between people lying on a towel on a beach or swimming in the ocean and people taking pictures of themselves lying on the beach and like jumping up and down 15 times to get the perfect snap of my time on the beach. And the distinction between who am I? Who's in the conversation? This version of me that I'm taking 10 snapshots to get the right version of me to be on the screen versus the lonely self that's jumping up and down on the beach to take these snapshots. Those two selves are in a very interesting conversation. And I think we do in coaching, there's a lot of a movement in closer to the therapeutic practice of parts work. But I'm wondering about the representational part, that part of me that's curated versus some of the other parts, and how much of our coaching is a conversation between the curated and the real self, because I think that is an interesting place to go to as well. So let's talk about some of these trends, coaching the relationship, and the system is the client, not the individual. So those of you that have been at some of our sessions around colleagues and couples work, we've been working with this third entity idea a lot in our community of practice sessions at the end of last year. But the unit of work, when it is the relationship, is very different to when it's an atomic and atomized self. Yeah. And even if we think about something like leadership development, the leader, the development of the leader versus the development of the relationship of the leaders, and that's a shifting space, to the system is a key space we need to work with. So who am I serving? And getting as coaches a lot more comfortable with me and two people in the room, and not just because I'm getting the leader to help me on board and brief the coaching that I'm going to do with this individual, but because this relationship is in frame, is a big thing. And in that coaching the relationship, I'm not advocating for any individual. I'm advocating for the relationship and the quality of the space between two people. A lot of focus in that space on intervening on patterns in real time as they play out as well. And it's an up in the complexity we deal with in coaching. And it also means that we have to have a different relationship with the stories people bring to coaching. Yeah. So if I'm working with an individual, we can say, what other stories might I hold about this? When I'm working with two people and the relationship, there is your story and my story, and then there's all the other stories and the story that's formed between us through the interaction between that. So even the way in which we work with the stories people bring to coaching becomes different. Yeah. So we'll continue talking about coaching the relationship, systems coaching, DO coaching, but it's a big trend. The second trend, this idea of wise agency. So I asked you at the start to think about, how much of power do you feel you have to change what's happening in the world here? And that in some way we can put on this low agency, high agency axis. So in Peter Limburger's work, he's brought these two ideas, and you can use vertical development as that vertical axis, together with agency as the expression of power into the world, into the system. And NPCs, when I'm low consciousness, low agency, is like a gaming term for non-player characters. And they're basically people that are fodder in games. You can't control them, you can't make them do interesting things, but they're there for the storyline, right? So you can just be an actor that's there for the storyline, but you're not really central to anything that's happening in the world. And so in the progression of our wisdom and agency together, we go from being non-player characters to being agentic fools. And agentic fools is we have a lot of agency. And think for a moment about, like, we can use lots of stereotypes here, but let's say a new entrant into the workplace in their first kind of team leader role, and they haven't led people before, they haven't been in the industry for a long time. They've got a lot of energy and spark, and they're willing to change everything, and they're reading about trends and all kinds of things, but very early on in their maturation journey. And so they're changing all kinds of things, but they don't have wisdom behind it. And so these are agentic fools. And from agentic fools, generally, we don't become agentic sages. We first go through the stage of spiritual bypassing. And this is now where I'm kind of, oh, it's the inner development game. I need to work on my inner game, and I'm developing it, and I'm developing it, and developing it. And in that same place, I'm losing some of my agency into the system. And so then I become like really lovely, and I'm on my path, and I'm doing my practices every day, but I'm checking out of the system and making an impact in it. So it's kind of an out of the world part of the journey. And from there, some people choose to lean into using some of the insights, some of the things that come from my practices and my development work and my consciousness and my plant medicine journeys and whatever it is back into the world. And that's the agentic sage. Now, this quote from Peter Limburger, I want to read, and I'm going to just keep revealing it because he's really wise. So he's saying he's moving away from this field in part for these reasons. So I'm moving away from talking about wise agency because I like to be ahead of the curve. And it said we're moving from knowledge work to wisdom work, or a wisdom economy, which means that a charlatan economy is close behind. And this is one of the key things we need to be careful of, because I know when I'm scrolling through all kinds of social media, podcasts, all kinds of platforms, there are millions of people wanting to tell us what their particular pool of wisdom is that they are bringing to the world. It used to be knowledge. Here's my framework. But now it's like, here's my practice. Here's my pearl of wisdom. So what Peter continues to say is more randos are going to come out of the woodwork, selling all sorts of wisdom woo to capitalize on your pain with nebulous promises to enlighten your life. The great enshittification of wisdom is upon us, a cycle that has been repeated since time immemorial, really. And that's my word for 2025, enshittification. It's when something that was beautiful just gets really noisy and full of nonsense, and you can't get to the real things anymore. And especially here, where a lot of people are also working with AI and LLMs to create their wisdom. So the wisdom is co-created with AI. The enshittification is happening much faster than it has ever before. Yeah. So here's another kind of landscape that relates to this, and that's very relevant to us as individuals, but also to our clients that we work with. And so once again, we have this time on the vertical axis, this idea of agency. I can change nothing to I can change everything. And then on the other axis, Nico Rose, he's a German coach, put things will definitely get worse to things will definitely get better. And what we see here is that we have positions of dystopia and utopia. together with powerlessness and hubris that create different positionings. And if we're working with clients and we're even just reflecting on ourselves, what we can see is that these positions have certain implications as to what's happening in the coaching space. And what Nico Rose and others are working with here is this concept of meliora, which is things can get better, and I can contribute to that. It's kind of a term for stoic equanimity. Um, so there is some hope. I haven't given up on hope completely, but there is hope plus action, and I don't have this overly optimistic view that everything's just going to work out fine. Yeah, and so this meaning making around the positioning can be very, very powerful. And I asked you the question of how do you think, what are your expectations of the future, and how much do you think you can change so you can position yourself on this landscape as well. So if you're a coach that's in hubris at the moment, which is like, I can change everything, know that even in your practice, you will overpromise. And if you're in this, I can change nothing, I can just hold space, in some way, um, that fatalism means that you will probably under-challenge your client. And if we want to be in stoic equanimity, we need to be able to hold both the truth of the world as it is and the possibility of movement in a realistic way. And yeah, I just find this a really useful framework, both for myself as a coach, particularly because I can get into all kinds of dystopic and destructive fantasies, maybe. Um, and I know I can get frustrated with some of my very utopic colleagues, but it's also useful for me to bring this as a frame of how my frame, my landscape, my inner position meets the inner position of the coaching client, and where we meet. So I'll offer you that as a sense-making framework. So blended AI and human coaching and workflows around that. This is kind of the thinking that people who are buying coaching are getting exposed to by asking questions to whatever AI support they are getting. Yeah. How should I design my next coaching intervention? Yeah. This is the kind of answer that AI is giving them. And a lot of people are being very influenced by that. So AI coaching is always on. So that's for prepping, in the moment things, nudging people to stick to their promises, 5 to 8 minute check-ins. It's kind of giving people scripts and prompts. And also, like, this is the gamification of coaching. 5 conversations in a row, you get the gold star streak for the week. Yeah. So AI coaches always on. The human coach offers depth and handles complexity and moments that matter. So working on dilemmas where power, conflict, meaning, big decisions that have to do with inner world circumstances, that might be useful. Patterns of change and accountability. So the thing is, the AI coach can hold me accountable in a tech way, but not in the way, this is awful, that evokes shame when I have to tell my human coach, no, I did nothing about it. We don't feel the same kind of shame saying to tech, no, I didn't do it. We just dismiss the notification, right? So there's a level of accountability that comes from human coaching that's different to AI coaching. AI gives you the consistency of the question, but it's easily dismissed and doesn't have the emotive load. When we're working with things where things have broken and fallen apart, and I need to, once again, coach the relationship, human coach, much better than the AI coach, unless two people are sitting in front of the AI coach together, which very few of the AI coaching platforms are systemic or relational coaching platforms at this point in time. It can give you advice about a relationship as an individual, but can it coach the relationship? Not so much. And then supporting action from inside the human coach. What are you going to do with this? So sure, the AI can ask those questions, but it's going to look and feel different when the human works with it. But I don't think this is the whole story. This is just what AI is kind of saying, right? And then there's the role for the internal people who are managing coaching, organization enablement. They need to work on things like how privacy and confidentiality and data and escalation and guardrails for when people are talking about at-risk things, and how you're going to level the impact and the quality of things, and deciding which AI coach we use and which level of coaches we use. That is like kind of the internal infrastructure that works together here. And so how the blended workflow runs, how organizations are starting to think about coaching, is the internal organizational people are assigning how much AI, how much human-led coaching we're going to do, who gets access to what levels of coaching. These people get an AI coach, these people get a human coach, or 3 human sessions, unlimited AI coaching, or this nudge tech, this habit-forming platform that's in. And then they set contract and say how we're going to deal with escalation of issues and confidentiality. Then we have human sessions, AI in between sessions. There's review that comes from the organization. And a lot of the closing and integration can happen inside the kind of, kind of integrating the journey, the coaching journey for the year might happen more with the human coach. Yeah. So this is how the world out there is starting to think about coaching. And think for a moment what this means. It means that enterprise digital coaching platforms like BetterUp, like Ezra, like Coach, all kinds of aggregator platforms are better positioned to offer this kind of integration between AI coaching and human coaching, because they can meet the organization, they can take the tech admin and admin burden away from you as the individual coach, they can give better price points. And this means that the old days where we get to, some executive coaches get to charge premium will still continue to exist, but the amount of people that play there without the tech around it will get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And there are 123,000 coaches in the world today. It doesn't sound like that much when you think about 8 billion people, but it is in some parts of the world starting to be oversubscribed, right? And the coaching schools are not interested in whether there are too many coaches in the market. They're just interested in getting the money they need from training more coaches. Yeah. So if you have not yet, as a coach, even played with something outside of talking to Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it is, I'd love for you to go and talk to some AI coaches. We have a wonderful developer of an AI coach platform here in Abongile. In Abongile, if you want to put some stuff in the chat around how people can engage with your coach, AI coach, please pop it in there. I've recently come across this app.aicoach.chat, and you can have a free coaching session a month with it. If you want to do more, you'll have to pay. But it's really interesting to see how it's not just straightforward coaching conversations. There are memory features where you can see what your coach is remembering about you. There are different coaching personas you can choose. Do you want the standard coach or do you want the really tough coach? It's almost like choose the Enneagram type of your coach. Yeah. And you can change what stays in the memory of the coach. So even here, we can do representational selves. We can edit the memories of the AI coach about us. Yeah. And it keeps coaching notes that are completely visible to the client. So go and look at some of the things that are out there. And more people might be asking you, what do you do between sessions? People might just opt into chatting to their chatbot anyway. And many people are doing that. And what that means is if you're a coach that doesn't, that kind of spills over into giving advice and feeling that you need to, kind of over function and solve problems for your client, you're going to do a much worse job in the practical stuff than the AI does, because its pattern recognition is just far superior, right? You have to do proper coaching as per ICF coaching competencies, and know that AI coaches can ask as good questions and will also ask questions about where do you feel it in your body and all kinds of things. The AI coaches can ask questions like that too. But things like your coaching presence is going to become a lot more important. So if we look at what the humans can do, what it looks like, the human coach advantage in that column, what it looks like versus what the AI does well, there's a couple of interesting things that are coming out here. Yeah. I think, and thank you to my friends that I walk with on a Friday. We had an interesting conversation about this just last Friday. And one of my friends said she thinks that one of the best coaching competencies from this point onwards, which maybe it always has been, but more importantly, will be silence. Yeah. So the coach's ability to bring silence and present silence to the conversation is something that, sure, AI sometimes is saying thinking, but that's not the same as being held in a container of silence. Yeah. And staying with things that are kind of part of the shadow, anger, envy, fear, betrayal, shame. There's a way in which we as humans can hold those almost taboo emotions without going, would you like to have 4 practices for solving for your grief? And, moving into problem solving, or so the AI can validate and ask reflective questions and offer coping strategies, but it cannot sit in the messiness in the same way as Bayo Okamulafe says, you got to sit in the pothole with some humans. You don't go sit in the pothole with your tech. Is slightly different, the feeling of being in that pothole. Yeah. And humans can work a lot more with the intuition around what's being unsaid, or not said, what's in between, what's the conversation we're not having, noticing that there's something off between what you're saying you're going to do and the look in your eyes. Yeah, which AI is not completely in the space of being able to do yet. We always say yet at this point in time. Working with the mythopoetic, like you can train your AI bot to bring poetry and mythology and give ideas for rituals or whatever, but actually bringing the mythopoetic presence, that's something that coaches do more. But you can look at this. We'll share these slides. Um, Humans can repair in real time. Humans sense the live field. One of the conversations we had, and Nangamso from our team who's here had this conversation with AI. She said, who's your competition? And it said coaches is one of the core competitors. And she said, what do you do better than coaches? And the AI actually answered, I have more lived experience. And we challenged it. At this point, she called me in. I'm like, just ask it, what's your definition of lived experience? It's no, I can draw on the narratives of all the people in the world that have given me data. That is not the same as having a body and feeling things. It can think about the pattern about feeling things. But I just thought that was ludicrous. I have more lived experience than humans, said the AI. Haha. Okay. So the deeply human coaching moves that you need to work with in your practice if you want to be a human that can work alongside AI in this flow. Hold the silence. Name the moment. Something's happening here right now. Ask the braver question than the client is asking themselves. Be a clean mirror. Instead of like, here's another 15 suggestions for what you could do. Would you like a playbook for the suggestion you like most? Track the body. Track the body. Track your body to help you understand what's happening for the client, especially where there's dissociation from the body. And asking, it's not just where do you feel the anger? The AI can ask that too. But what's happening for you right now as you say that? That kind of wisdom is very different. the human can do repair fast. Um, can we rewind? I think I missed you. That kind of conversation. Invite values-based action. What would integrity do here? What would wisdom offer you? What do you want to say as you look to the moon? AI can do those questions, but it's not necessarily well trained mythopoetically unless you tell it to be. Make it relational, and coach the relationship, and invite creative play-based and mythopoetic spaces. So kind of working with right brain. Left brain pattern recognition, AI will win. Yeah? Even if you're really smart. But it's that kind of right brain coaching space that's important here. Now, nervous system regulation. Um, so, self-care, it's really important. After this, I'm going to just pause for a couple of questions and comments. But there is limitations to self-care in times of the apocalypse. My dystopic position is coming out here again, right? But I think there's a couple of things we need to work with here. The first is, if we just work with this, like, are you well regulated? How's your self-care? How's your self-care? This can become a retreat from reality. Whereas coaches, we are so focused on the individual's inner state that we kind of saying it's okay for a system to be deeply messed up, unjust, violent, violating people's sovereignty and well-being, and kind of leave all of that on the individual. And that takes us away from the collective struggle to create a future that is viable. Yeah. So it's not just on the individual to have their individual practices so I can glide through a messed up world. Yeah. Sometimes we need to face the messed up world. Yeah. And not make it okay through our practices. And there's a lifespan to that anyway. The inward turn can depoliticize people. Yeah. And that can in some way create a subtle judgment that better people are better regulated, where some people are, and a lot of us are actually, from our political identities, in a place um, where things are not as it should be. And that question, what would Steve Biko say about this situation here? What would some of the people who worked on the abolishment of slavery say about the way in which these things are happening? Would they just say meditate more? Yeah. And as coaches, I think because the political world, as in the political world of politics out there, is so volatile and unsafe, we may be shying away from the political identities of humans. And the political self is not what party do you belong to and who do you think is right and wrong, but that part that is in conversation between how power and justice works in the world and how I'm positioned inside that. Yeah. And well-being can become consumerist. It can become narcissistic. And if it's just the individual outside of my relationship with a community, where self-care is divorced from what others around us need. And this is part of the risk, even though there are relational goals in the inner development goals. Something like the IDGs run a great risk of becoming that if we continue to talk about the IDGs without talking about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And as coaches, if I ask you, name some of the Sustainable Development Goals that the IDGs are meant to support, I can promise you IDGs have much better marketing campaigns than the SDGs have. And so anyone that's working with IDGs without talking about SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals at the same time, or a version of that, a view of the future, an activist agenda, there's big trouble that comes with that. And, we can talk in other problems of the inner development goals, but like great marketing, but that risk is big. And what happens when we're here is we can make the client deficient in a mad system. There's something wrong with me because I can't stay centered and grounded in a world that is totally mad. And that's something that I'm very worried about. So we'll dive in deeper, but let's just hear a couple of thoughts, a couple of ideas, a couple of things that are maybe rising to the surface for people who are in this call right now. What would you like to ask or say or muse about? Everything welcome.
Yeah. To navigate this.
Diane, is there something you want to share?
Yeah, I'm trying to navigate this. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so what came up for me is trying to self-regulate and stay sane in an insane environment. And that's just effed up.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the place. I think most of us are probably working with clients that are exactly in that pincer move, right? And in many ways, I'm in that pincer move as well. And to just go, well, do your practices more. Do your practices more means that the system doesn't change. The system then consumes people and spits them out. And we've seen great leaders being consumed by an insane system. And the sad thing is then like my confidence just goes down and down and down because I'm doing all the practices and it's just not working.
And people are burning out and they feel overwhelmed and guilty because they can't cope in these totally insane, incopable environments.
Yeah. So now we're back. Now we're back into that stoic centrality, right? If we become too dystopic about the current reality, then we're in the place where it's like our agency can just disappear in some way. So I can't change everything, but I can change some things. And I'm not overly optimistic or overly pessimistic, but I'm not trying to just fix it with individual practices. We have to work into, some things need to change. And a bit later, we'll talk about Bonita Roy's work around post-formal actors and systems breaking and how we support systems to shift and change. But that's also a slippery slope. But yeah, thanks for bringing that in, Diane. Anyone else that wants to pop in with some thoughts, ideas, and Martha, and then Rikus.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to articulate it, but there's a sense of I hear what you're saying about we can become quite narcissistic. I think that's true. And I think we've seen a lot of that kind of behavior win out, actually gets rewarded. So, we talk about coaching the relationship, but what I'm seeing is that as humans, we want to blame something or someone. We want to pinpoint what's going on in the system. And it's easier to say, well, it's your leadership but I'm not sure that we're thinking like when we're saying it's about maybe coaching the system, because what we're dealing with is emergence. Nobody wants to be insane. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. And yet all together, we come together and we're creating crazy, uncopable, you said, I like that, uncopable situations where nobody is thriving or few people are thriving or only the narcissist is thriving. So I think it's really developing the capacity to work at that level of complexity where you've got to step right back. Well, there's just no one to blame. There's just stuff to relate to.
Yeah.
And how do we do that?
Yeah.
It's hard. I'm finding it hard.
It's very, very hard. And this is that piece. it's so easy to get into powerlessness. It's the system is doing this to me, and it's my bad leader, and it's like all of that. And then hopelessness, blind pessimism. It's like a real thing. It's a real pit that we're all faced with, and that's in the system. And how do we coach not just an individual, but the system to be in a place where we continue to have that sense that things can get better, and we can. So this is, I would change Nico Rose's thing that I can contribute to this. I, together with the rest of us, can contribute to this. So working on agency in this mad system, so we don't get stuck in powerlessness, is important. And yes, it's complex. And that's where people like Bonita Roy, who is a complexity thinker, is saying some things must just be dismantled. But then we have certain politicians that are very good examples of dismantling. And then we're sitting with all kinds of ethical and moral questions around the ethics of dismantling systems, right? And it is very complex, Martha.
Perhaps maybe you've hit on it. Change is possible, but it needs collective will, and it needs political will. There need to be kind of, stakeholders, the high-level stakeholders in the system have to agree, and that's where maybe things are.
Yeah, and this is where we're back in kind of the field where some coaching methodologies are meeting OD methodologies. Because in OD, people like Dave Snowden has been working with change and complexity for a long time. We can't have one set of, here's the blueprint for how we're going to change the system. We can't have one person deciding what that change is going to be. We're working with emergence, we're working with experimentation, but these are not just fluffy ideas. They are actual things where we go, here are the experiments we are going to do. This is how we're going to track them. This is, but we're not waving flags on stages and saying, as a result of this new value, the whole world is going to change, because no one believes that anymore. Yeah? So, Rickus, and then Sharon, and then Lynn. That was the kind of sequence. I saw the hands. Rickus.
On reflection, it's been covered. I'm also concerned about the agentic fools, really, that you mentioned, and this issue of complexity. We can change a complex system, but we can't change it the way we like, because it's a complex system. The intent and the result diverges, and it's two things happening at the same time. Technology are empowering individuals and small groups to the extent where in some ways an individual or a small group can compete with a country increasingly. And at the same time, in a geopolitical context, might is right is becoming fashionable again. And I don't see those two trends working together in a useful way that's supportive of life.
Thank you for joining me on the dystopic side of views of the future just for a moment, Rickus. So, yeah. Sharon.
Right. Hi. So, back in the early days when I started coaching, I learned the hard way that having come out of corporate myself and working in corporate, that my role as coach was to help my clients thrive or leave, because there's no middle of the road in corporate, and I'm using corporate in the systemic context. So thrive or leave, it depends on who you're working with, what level of the organization are they at, what kind of influence do they have on the system. And it's a motto that I have held over the years. But when you come to this conversation, what strikes me is more about how do we, as coach, have right relationship with what is.
Beautiful.
Because if I'm not in right relationship with what is, then I'm going to easily fall into the hole with my client. If I am living, practicing right relationship, and right relationship does not mean giving up. Right relationship means until I can do something about it. And if I can't, what can I do? So it's the whole, you plant the seeds of the trees that you will never sit under.
Yes.
So that for me is what's coming out of this conversation, that there has to be a place that the coach is in
Yes.
order to be able to work in a toxic system, a broken system. They're not all broken, but some of them are very broken.
Yeah.
And most of my practice these days is supervision. And that's a big conversation in our supervision. How do we get to right relationship with what is without that being resentment or resignation?
Yeah.
So you always believe I can do something.
Yeah.
I may not ever see the benefit of that, but I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. And that idea of self as instrument, if the instrument of myself is not able to bring that perspective and the presence behind it, if the energetic presence I'm bringing, if the frequency I'm bringing is nothing matters, then the core instrument of my work, has become dysfunctional.
Who you are is how you coach.
Who you are is how you coach. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lynn, anything you want to add to the conversation here?
Are you calling on me?
Yes,
Lucille?
I saw your hand up a while ago, Lynn.
Yeah, yes. I was going to say something along the lines of the last comment, just the capacity to be with what is and to find creativity within that, the space, the intelligence that is in actually what is, and how to access that deeper intelligence in the moment. And so very much along the lines of the last comments, which is why I sent up a little heart. So thank you for those comments.
Thanks. Thanks, Lynn. So I'd love to just offer one or two more things and then we can continue the conversation. And that is just from the perspective of what I'm hearing in our coach community. And so when I'm listening to coaching podcasts, when I'm listening to leading edge thinkers in our field, when I'm listening to some of the people that are in this room here, especially those of us that have a lot of post-conventional capacities, what are some of the things that I'm hearing in the field a lot at the moment? I am hearing a lot of conversations about love. And not just love as a feeling, but love as a container, love as a vibration, love as a frequency, love as that thing that brings coherence and life and reciprocity with the planet. So in some way, maybe if we take Sharon and Lynn's comments, like the coach who's fallen out of relationship with love is a very dangerous instrument. Yeah. Now, some of the people in Odie that have been talking about love for a long time is Adam Kahane. And what he's always been in the polarity of the conversation between love and power, saying things like love without power is anemic and weak. So we're back in like kind of a polarity here. But Amy Elizabeth Fox and the crowd from Mobius have been talking about love a lot in the last year. Now, if we work with love and we lose sight of other parts of the polarity of love, which has to do with agency and power, right? We can have kindness without challenge in our coaching. We can be complicit in spiritual bypassing, colluding with our client's story. It's almost love as a narcotic that keeps us stuck in where we already are. We can underestimate reality, so right relationship with reality and power. And we can overstep boundaries. We can step outside of our mandate as coaches if we don't have something at the other side of this polarity. But as a frequency, I do believe that love is a large part of the conversation, and the harder the world gets, the more we need to bring love. But we can't just bring an anemic and weak version of love, which is out of conversation with power on the other side of that polarity. There's a lot of conversation about emergence in the coaching field. And once again, I want to say, coaches, please go to some of the thinkers in complexity, like Rolf Stacey, like Dave Snowden, like Albin, and then even people like Otto Scharmer. And in South Africa, our own Sonja Blichnout have been working with this idea of emergence for decades. This is not something as coaches that we are just making up at this point in time. And there are great thinkers and great work and great theory that exists around things like sense making, hosting adaptive spaces, complexity, real-time work, co-arising solutions, ways finding. Go and relate to what's already out there. Don't go and make up some pseudo coaching things. Go back to the theories that are there and draw from that. What can happen if we work just with we're in the emergent, is we can avoid having any kind of goals and strategy. And I remember that beautiful saying that was part of my management training early on in my life. If you aim at nothing, you always hit a bullseye. Yeah. So you can draw the target afterwards, right? Or Alice in Wonderland, if you don't know where you want to go, wherever you go is where you're going, and that's fine. So as coaches, if we just in the emergent and we don't look up from that as to what the trajectory is of this emergence, we can get lost, and we can end up 7,000 miles from where we want to be, where actually we started 2 miles away from it, because we're just emerging in the wrong direction all the time. We can get lost in complexity jargon, over and understeering coaching. So understeering is almost like, just let it emerge, we don't have to have goals, it's all cool. And oversteering is like, it must be emergent. You must follow these methodologies all the time. And if there are no boundaries in the emergence, we can create trauma due to lack of safety. Yeah. Then the coach's own maturation journey to enhance self as instrument, self as coach. There's so many people talking about it. I'm not even going to point you towards thinkers. And we know that our own maturation journeys allow us some access to a field that the AI agents maybe does not have lived experience other than their reported lived experience. And it can unlock our coaching genius. And wow, if I play some coaching podcasts to some of the CEOs that I work with, they will leave the coaching, right? Because it's so far from the reality that they're dealing with that it feels like, just like some form of post-conventional navel gazing. And we have to be very cautious about not getting lost inside our own jargon and the numinosity of the liminal space in the emergent present future. Yeah. So just be cautious of that. Then there's a lot of talk about attunement, transformational frequencies, and like being attuned with my client, like a tuning fork. These are spiritual practices. Attunement's a spiritual practice. It's a word that in the 1980s would only have come out of the kind of new age movements. Yeah. And so attunement has certain connotations and some beautiful spiritual practices related to it. I see attunement as something that allows us to have accurate contact with our clients. Yeah. And attunement is useful. And attunement helps us with co-regulation and some of those skills that we can bring. Transformational frequencies have to do with the quality of presence that we bring that allows people to see and allows new possibilities to be valid and to be born. But we have to be very cautious about overreaching into therapeutic spaces. We have to also be cautious about coach burnout. If the burden on me is this finely tuned presence 100% of the time, and my world's also going mad, I can start performing a state. It can be performative attunement as well. And that's challenging. And we need to also be careful of healer, savior, guru dynamics that comes from some of that. Now, the people who are talking about things, there's lots of them. Thomas Hubel may be one of the people talking a lot about it. Struzzi Heckler, Boyatsis, lots of people, if you want to go into that more. Now, here's something that's both beautiful and absolutely frightening for me. I'm hearing a lot more conversations in the coaching community about coaching as kind of mixed mystical arts. What is coaching? You know, it's mentoring, it's somatic work, it's therapy, it's being a shaman, it's taking people on a medicine journey, it's being a guide, it's being a teacher, it's being a psychic, it's being an astrologer, all in one package. Really? How interesting. Now, if coaching is a mixed mystical art, ethics and scope of practice, and I'm sure the ICF are turning in their grave as they, or maybe they're not, I don't know. But the over-functioning of the coach needing to be all of these things, big thing, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't put quivers in your arrow. I know that my breathwork practice is a beautiful thing that's come into my coaching work. Does that make me a mixed mystical arts guru that has a cloak and special powers? No. But it also means that we can make coaching awful by trying to be everything to everyone. What does your coach not do? So in one of our Friday conversations, we said, wouldn't it be wonderful if a coach's CV didn't just say what the wonderful outcomes were that they're going to give all their clients, but that they actually said, here are the things I don't do. How about creating some enabling constraints for our work so that the magic in there is more defined, as opposed to I am a mixed mystical arts teacher. So yeah, there are some people that are using that. If you're feeling like a mixed mystical arts teacher, here is something that comes from kind of the Brahman tradition in India. If you are a guru, part of the guru-acolyte relationship is that the acolyte's actions, whatever actions they take, reflect and are the responsibility of the guru for as long as this person is your student. So if you become the guru coach, everything that everyone does that listens to you reflects on you and not on them. And I'm not sure how you feel about that level of responsibility. So play with that. Let's cut ourselves down to size and also say what we don't do, because there's a beauty in bringing all of these things, and there's a big ethical scope of practice risk as well. And then Bonita Roy, she is the source of conversations about post-formal actors. Now, this is not post-conventional action logic and vertical development terms, but a post-formal actor is defined as someone that doesn't just play a role inside the system. So you're not in the system. I'm operating on the system itself. It's not, I can think in complexity, but I act on the forms and structures creating reality here. And I'm willing to change them. And I'm willing to break them. And I'm willing to dismantle them. Does this make you think of any particular political leaders we have right now? We have a couple of people that are priding their ability to break the systems that they have been charged to lead. So, post-formal actors, there is something about having that level of agency that says, I am changing the system. I'm not just in the system, I'm working on the system at the same time. But if we make that into too much of a heroic narrative, a self-concept instead of a lens, how can I work on the system versus in the system is a lens. How can I be a post-formal actor, the person that dismantles the system? We can glorify disruption, which may be great, but that comes with big questions around what are the morals and ethics of dismantling systems. And if we work with post-formal actors, if we're coaching someone to dismantle a system without working around the principles of morality and ethics of how we dismantle, we could be coaching world wars, yeah, at a micro or a macro level, yeah. So I think post-formal acting, so work on the system rather than in the system, is a very valuable lens. But be careful of conversations about breaking systems without talking about morality and ethics. Yeah. So I would love, let's just see what the time check is, for you, Charisse, to please pop people into a breakout room for just 15 minutes to talk in groups of 4, more or less, around what you find challenging about what's been shared, what opportunities are you seeing, what does this mean for the future of your own work? If there are things that I left off the list, I'm sure there are. Please share some of those in your small group too. There's wisdom in the crowd. But what do you find challenging? What opportunities are you seeing? And stick with your coaching practice of how you lead your life at this point in time. And we'll come back and we'll just share 1 or 2 thoughts and how Aephoria is going to be contributing to these trends in coaching. But yeah, let's have a conversation. Thank you. What does this mean for our practice as coaches? Yeah. Anyone that wants to share anything, you don't have to be an oracle or a guru, but just your human experience of what this means. And I see that there's some other people who are working on AI coaching bots. Kay, you also welcome. Those of you that want to reach out to Kay and Abongile that are working with AI coaching bots. Kay's coaching bots, very Enneagram specific. Abongile's more general. Do make contact with them so you can find out what's happening in that space. I hear that that's something that's going on. But let's just hear from 2 people. Anything that's come up that's food for thought as you think about your coaching world evolving in 2026. And then we'll close off with some final thoughts from us as Aephoria.
I'd like to go and finish off.
Thanks, Diane.
For
Let's
me,
just
what
take
comes
30 seconds and then we'll hear from someone else. Thanks.
What comes up for me is love, humanity, and whether that be in systems coaching, team coaching, one-on-one, it's that heart capacity and to be with someone and to give them clarity and agency. Yeah,
that's beautiful. And the question that leaves me with is how much of that am I able to give myself? Yeah. So for me as a coach, our internal, who we are is how we coach. Yeah. One more comment perhaps. Wherever you are. Yeah. Joanne?
Okay, I'd like to say something. Thank you. What came up for me is the whole issue of balance once more. The need for balance, not only as a coach and what you're doing for people and the framework in which you need to work, but also the balancing of yourself as a coach, recognizing that what you can and cannot do, what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. The challenges of working with AI as a writer. I hate to think that people can now just, talk to AI and get a book done, but it's here and we can't do anything about it. So it's about merging and so on. And I just feel that the recognition of balance is important. When you spoke about, Lucille, you spoke about going into the self-care zone and how it could make you possibly narcissistic, selfish, disconnected. That is so true. Because a lot of times people may use meditation and these tools as escapes. Yeah. And so the idea of balance, and the other idea that jumped out at me really was the whole question of reality. So while you recognize that we're living in a world that's very challenging, some may say even totally messed up, my personal philosophy is that the world has been here long before me and it's going to be here long after me. So what do I do with my footprint? That's how I make peace with that idea. So those are my
Thank
two
you.
thoughts.
Thank
And
you.
I'm throwing it out here. If anyone can reach out to me as I'm now thinking about this journey, not as an executive coach, but more personal and one-to-one personal life coach. If anyone can reach out to me with any info, more than, I mean, you gave a lot of info, Lucille. It was so informative. Thank you. But anything along those lines in a kind of simplistic way, because I am a firm believer. When you listed the things that are coming up now with coaches and the interests and the areas and so on, the one I would add is creativity, because of my work, because I've seen what one can do with creativity. I'm big on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, Joanne, if you want to be brave and put that out into the broader community, pop your email address in the chat, and some of the people that may want to take you up on that invitation will undoubtedly reach out. Something beautiful that I heard is, I love that idea of what do I do with my footprint. And in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders kind of ways of thinking about ways of being in the world, sometimes people say, what is the foot wisdom? What is the wisdom of my feet trying to tell me about the way forward? And so maybe that is a thought for all of us as we start ending off this conversation. What is the wisdom of my feet telling me about the road I need to walk in 2026? So what we're doing at Aephoria in support of these trends, if you have not yet worked with our workplace colleagues or couples or team reports in coaching, please reach out for our coaching community. If you want to experience a free sample report of the colleagues or the couples work in particular that we launched in 2025, I am in love with both of these reports. We use them a lot. And the workplace, working with the duos at work is such a potent place to work in terms of coaching the relationship. And if you need some tools in that space, we've got that offered. And in March, we will be doing, as Cherie said at the start, our inaugural level 5 and level 6 trainings in couples and colleagues coaching. So if you want to sign up for the pilot versions of these programs, let us know with an email and you can be added to the waiting list. We will continue to work with and partner with people to integrate tech and coaching, and we're working on our partnership with G-Work around nudge technology and the Enneagram, so keep watching the space. We will also continue to make sense of some complex patterns in our existential worlds, in our maturity sentence marking and other coaching insights with the use of LLM. And we will continue to bring you these and other existential topics in our community of practice. So please stay part of our community, stay connected. If you want to find out anything more about what we're doing, you've got some email addresses. Charisse will pop just the main hello@Aephoria group into the chat as well. And my parting wish for everyone is, may this year be a year in which the space between your representational self and your real self, where that space narrows rather than widens. May your sense of who you are in the world be informed by who you are and what you do in the world, rather than the way in which you talk about who you are or take photos of who you are and what you do in the world. And let's do things in community. The more complex things become, not only the lonelier, but also the more dangerous the road that we try to walk alone. The burdens of the world are too big to carry on any single back. We can only hold them in the space between us. And may we continue to have great compassion with everyone in the world who is affected by some of the crazy post-formal actors that are making decisions about breaking systems without morals and ethics informing what they're doing. So thank you so much for today. May your practice continue to grow and thrive, and may we together make sense of how the world is unfolding. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucille. Thanks for this wonderful
Thank you,
topic.
Lucille. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Love to
See you everyone
everyone.
next week. Bye.
Great session.
Sepela
Thank you.
Gebotse. Goodbye. Lovely to see you, Kay.